There are two types of obstacles to financial success, and today we're going to go through exactly what they are and how we can make sure we avoid them in our own life. Hi, my name is James Coursier, and thank you for joining us today. And welcome to the Money Paradox podcast. Now, the reason why I want to cover this off from a perspective of these two categories is because for a lot of people, we tend to over-focus on one section and neglect the other. And for those that are wondering, it is behind me, it is mindset and strategy. They are the two categories. And in previous podcasts, I've gone through a whole number of different obstacles or barriers that can get in the way of our financial success. But today I want to talk through what really splits these up into the two areas. And then I want to jump into one of those areas in a bit more detail. Okay, so most of the time, people focus too much on the strategy side of things. And that is because that feels more tangible. It's all about techniques and skills and developing a plan, and it's very learnable, right? It's very applicable in a kind of very obvious way. Whereas mindset is a bit out there. It's a bit more intangible, a bit more esoteric. And a lot of people just think, oh, that's a given, that'll be fine. Or it doesn't apply, or it doesn't help that much. You know, I can't really change my psychology, I can't really change my mindset. Well, all of that I definitely would not agree with and can encourage you to really neglect this area. So from my side of things, the paradox that I use, the 7-step process that follows the word paradox, that's all over my website, my social media that I've talked about, and I'm sure I'll be talking about in a lot more detail in future podcasts. That is all strategy, and that is very powerful, and that is something you absolutely want to learn and have a strategy to apply to your own life. But you also want to be addressing the mindset, the psychology side of things too. So with that in mind, I want to cover off a few concepts within that today, so you've got a bit of an idea of the kind of things that can really make a powerful shift for you within this section of mindset. Okay, so the first thing I want to talk about is the secret to happiness. Now, the reason why I say it like that is because understanding how happiness works and what creates happiness in us gives us a much better insight in how to be able to achieve that in our own life. Without it, what happens is people tend to walk around, be affected by their environment rather than taking control of it. They wander around and they get into situations, and some situations make them happy, other situations don't make them happy. And the trouble with that approach is you don't have control, you don't have ownership over your ability to be happy. And so if you're in the ideal environment, that environment is giving you what you need to be happy, great, you're happy. But what if you're not? And for a lot of people, you aren't in that environment. So much better to take ownership of it and to understand how to create your own environment to be happier, or to change how you think about happiness and how you approach it to be happier. So let's think for a second, what makes us happy? So before I go into this a bit more detail, just think, what makes you happy? What is it specifically? Think of what is the trending theme between all of the instances that have made you happy in the past, or the things you think would make you happy in the future. So the way I like to look at it is comparing your expectations to your life conditions. So if you're in a situation where you expect something, right? You expect to leave your house, there'd be no traffic on the road, your car's going to be in perfect order, you go to work, everybody's going to be super nice to you at work, you're going to be able to get all your work done before 5 o'clock, and then you're going to be able to go home early and have the whole evening. If that's your expectation for the day, and that day plays out, and all of that happens, okay, and more, you get to leave at 3 o'clock, your road, all of your car, you go outside and your car's for some reason better than you expected, then you're going to be happy, because what you expected from life or that day is lower than what happened that day, the life conditions that played out for you. Okay, Think about it. That's pretty much always what creates happiness. Now, if what happens in your life is the same as your expectations, then often we're not happy. We just take it for granted. So if that day played out exactly how we expected, then we would think, well, yeah, that's what I was expecting, so good. We wouldn't necessarily be happy about it. We would just say, yeah, that's what we expected. Even if what we were expecting was pretty amazing, right? If that was your day and that was like ideal and that played out and you got that, you'd be like, yeah, okay, great. You kind of take it for granted. But what often happens is we have an expectation of how the day will play out, and then it doesn't play to that. And actually something much worse happens. And when that happens, when the life conditions that play out are worse than what we're expecting, then we are unhappy, right? So it's important to think about it from these two perspectives. Now you're probably thinking, well, James, why get into the minutiae of this and the kind of principles behind this? Well, if you can understand the formula, because that's what it is essentially, it's a formula for happiness, life conditions are better than expectations, then you know in what circumstances you're going to be happy. And you know by definition then what circumstances you're not going to be happy. Now, not only can you become unhappy from these situations, but you can also lead to a place of suffering. And if you've ever felt suffering before, then I suspect what I'm about to say is what situation you're in. And if you're sitting here listening to this video feeling suffering or being in a place of suffering, then listen carefully and then think, does this apply to me right now? Is this relate to what's going on for me? Let me know in the comments. I would love to know and hear your view and hear your perspective on how this compares to your understanding on the subject of happiness. So, if you're in a place where your life conditions are lower than your expectations, you're unhappy, right? But if this happens on a consistent basis and you feel powerless to change it, right? So what's going on in your life is less than what you want from your life. Keeps happening and you don't feel able to change that. You feel like it's just going to keep happening like that consistently and you don't see an end in it. That is what creates suffering. Because you then think, well, am I ever going to feel happy? How do I feel happy? This is just going to carry on. I'm just going to constantly be unhappy or mostly be unhappy. And then we start to suffer because then it's not temporary. It starts to become permanent. And that's scary. It's like pain. It doesn't matter how bad the pain is. If it's temporary, we can deal with it. It's fairly simple to deal with. It's pretty annoying at the time, but we can deal with it because we know at some point in the future it's going to go. But if we start to think this pain's never going to go, it's always going to be there, that starts to get very difficult to deal with. Because then we start having to deal with the fact that this is always going to be there. How do we deal with it? What happens? How do we adapt around that? It starts to become very difficult to manage. It's no different with the concept around happiness. So what? So if that's the reality, if that's the formula for happiness or unhappiness, then how do we make our lives better as a result? Well, if you think about the subject of money or financial freedom or feeling wealthy or any of these things, we set the rules around that. We set the expectations around that. No one else, we do. We may borrow someone else's rules, but we ultimately set them. And each person has varying rules that they apply. And those rules may be taken from our family, our friends, essentially our upbringing, and also certain identities of ourself that may have been predisposed from our genetics or the way our mind works based on our own DNA. Okay, so kind of evolution and not evolution, sorry, our upbringing, our environment, and also our own innate personality. The two together kind of creates our own set of rules. So, if your rules are very hard to meet, then it's going to be very hard to get the nice feeling of being able to achieve those rules. So if your view of what you need to be happy, your expectations are very high, then it's going to be very difficult for you to be happy. Sounds obvious, right? But unless you start to think about it in a really conscious way, you can get really caught out in this one. So are you someone that has very high expectations, means that it's very hard for you to feel happy? Okay? If you are, then you're setting yourself up for failure. You're essentially saying you can't be happy on a regular basis unless you're achieving to some really, really, really high level. Now, in some ways, there's a benefit there because it can push us to achieve a lot. So that's great, but at what cost? At the cost of most of the time not feeling happy. And this, in some ways, is the source of the stress response for a lot of people. We create this stress response in ourselves, not because we like to feel stressed, but because we like the outcome it has in us. If we feel stressed, we work hard because we need to feel like we're pushing out of it and to not feel stressed, and then we get these great outcomes. But we feel rather unhappy through the process. So better to come out of that and to reset our expectations to something much better. Now be careful. I'm not saying lower your expectations, because that's often what people say. I can't lower my expectations because then I'm just going to go out and I'm not going to try and achieve as much as I am trying to achieve now. There's a big difference between what you go out and you seek to achieve and your goals and the outcomes that you set in your life and your expectations. You absolutely want aspirational goals, to have a huge purpose within your life, a big focus in what you want to create, a big why, a why that is bigger than you, something that really juices you. I absolutely am behind that. But just remove the expectations. Remove that expectation to constantly feel you've got to get X or Y or Z to feel happy. And instead come at it from a different angle and set the bar very low. You could have the smallest thing and be happy. You could have just a brief conversation with someone you love. You could notice how beautiful nature is. Notice that you live in such an incredible time with such amazing technology, that where you grew up, the people that are around you, the friends you have, all of these things, all right? Now, the reason why I'm saying all this is because if you have the wrong mindset around being happy, then it doesn't matter how much money you make, you're not going to be happy, or you're not going to be happy most of the time. So yes, go out and seek to increase your bank balance and become wealthier from a financial standpoint. Yes, do that. But at the same time, acknowledge that there are so many things in your life right now that are amazing. You already have wealth. You already have huge riches within your life. It may just not be within your bank balance. Or you may even have a great bank balance, but what about all those other things? Wealth and riches are not just about money. It's about a much wider piece. Secrets being happy, expectations lower than life conditions. So make sure our expectations are dropped. Just effectively remove the expectation and just seek for goals. Seek for what you want from life while appreciating what you have. And then from a life conditions point of view, that's the piece we tend to focus on. We tend to just try and increase the life condition. And yes, you have the ability to do that and you can focus on that and absolutely do that. But avoid trying to set this expectation too high and keep comparing yourself, comparing your life conditions to it. Equally, own your environment. So come at life conditions from a different standpoint. How to explain it? Instead of going around trying to do more and achieve more, think what within my life, within my environment, within the conditions that I have within my life, what do I have control over and what do I not? And focus on the things that you have control over, that you have influence over, because those are the things that you're able to move and have influence on and increase and improve in terms of life conditions. The things that you don't have control over, there's no point spending time and energy focusing on that, because it's not going to change the bar. It's not going to change how good your life conditions are. Okay? Sounds obvious, but it's a really important one. And the final thing I'll leave you with for this video is about ownership and control. This is so important, and I've mentioned this in previous videos. Take ownership of your situation, your environment. Don't allow your environment to take control of you. Think about it. Are you someone that is fully in control of your environment? Or are you someone where environment is taking control of you, that you're just wandering through and people are telling you what to do? Or if the weather's bad or good, that's really affecting you, or whether Brexit happens or not, it's affecting you, or whether taxes go up or not next year, it's affecting you, or whether your company decide to pay you a bit more next year, it's affecting you. Or are you going out and saying, what do I want my environment to look like? How does my in what environment would I most succeed? And go out and create that environment or find that environment. If you take that kind of approach, you are going to be so much more successful. And you may be thinking, yeah, but that's easy for you to say, James. That's hard, right? It's hard to take ownership and take control of that. It's very draining, and you can't just go out and create an environment. Well, yes, you can. You really can. And if you don't feel you can because you've never done it, then what I would encourage you to do is just to start thinking like that, to start practicing behaving like that. And in a very short period of time, once you start getting used to that, you will be amazed at the kind of shifts you'll see in your life. I've seen it in my life. I've seen it in many of the people around me. I absolutely agree with that concept. So I hope you've enjoyed today. I hope you found this valuable. If you have, please let me know in the comments. Let me know whether you've liked it, any bits you liked in particular, anything that really brought out some inspiration in yourself, some further thoughts or advice you want to share with the other viewers of this. Please let us know in the comments. Any questions you have, anything you want me to cover off in future videos, again, please let me know. I would love to hear from you and see how this is impacting your life. So thank you. My name's James Coursier, and I'll see you soon.